Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Welcome to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. I'm your host today, Alex, and now that I'm back after a couple of weeks off, Cass has run away. Apparently she didn't miss me as much as she said she did, but don't fret. While she is gone, we have Charlotte, one of the newest journalist recruits, stepping in right here. How are you today, Charlotte?
I am good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. What did you get up to on the weekend?
Not much really. I'm actually moving out, so a lot of packing. A pretty boring situation.
You're going back to your hometown of Whoop Whoop?
Yep, Whoop Whoop. So close.
What's the adjective? Where is it?
It's called Waruka.
Oh, okay,
yep,
nice.
York Peninsula. I'm sure you've heard of it.
I definitely have. Classic Waruka. Shout out to anyone who's from Waruka.
Yes, represent. Well, we have a massive show for you tonight, so get strapped in. Cass speaks about mental health in the workplace with JobEdge director Carolyn Mounce. Plus, we have Ciaran taking you through a new bottle-o that is open on Hutt Street that is completely non-alcoholic.
And later on, Amber talks you through Hecs debt and how they are affecting home loans. And Brayden takes you through all the good news that's happened this week.
But before we get to all that, Grace speaks with David Elliot about cycling in Adelaide.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
With individuals finding more effective ways to reduce their carbon footprint, a very obvious first step can be riding a bike instead of driving a car or taking public transport. But does Adelaide's current infrastructure support those that choose to cycle as a made mode of transport?
What we consistently find is the answer is no. People often feel really intimidated by our lack of infrastructure, and they find the infrastructure that is there non-contiguous, which means it doesn't connect to like-for-like infrastructure, and it's severely broken and often interrupted by heavy motor vehicle traffic. So people don't feel safe using it, and they often find that the workarounds to get around poor infrastructure is inconvenient, indirect and unsafe as well.
What do you think could be done to support us and make it safer?
There are lots of things that we can do, and some of them are big, some of them are small. One of the easiest things that we can do is to lower the default residential speed limit. So we know that a lot of council areas have 40k speed limits on residential roads, so that's non-main roads, basically where people live, and reducing those speed limits have reduced the frequency and severity of motor vehicle collision, and that makes streets a lot safer for walking and cycling for people of different ages and different riding abilities. So that's one of the simplest things that we can do. It's certainly one of the cheapest, and it basically makes all of our local road networks a cycling and walking network. What we then need to also address is the lack of safe crossing points over main roads. So those safe local networks can be fine to use, but if they're not providing you opportunities to safely cross a main road, then they become effectively islands that operate in isolation to each other. So we need to make sure that there's those really safe connections. We also need to look at opportunities to actually install safe separated infrastructure as well, bridge those gaps and allow longer journeys and allow more direct journeys the same way that people can make on main roads in their cars. So that offers that safety and convenience that people are really looking for when it comes to moving between suburbs rather than just around their local area.
Of the changes that you've just mentioned for us, how can we go about making sure they could potentially be implemented?
Well, councils are constantly putting out a consultation within their local areas. We see consultations for what's called local area traffic management plans. The best thing that we can do as residents is to get involved with those surveys and those consultation processes and tell councils what we want. If we want safer streets, we need to be collectively asking for them. If no one's asking for it, then it doesn't happen. So that's a really easy one to get involved with. You don't have to be a transport expert to ask for safe infrastructure, and you don't necessarily need to know what all the mechanisms and designs are to be able to ask for safety on the street. You can also obviously write to your local MPs and ask them to support things when they come up, such as the draft state cycling plan. That's currently under review, but getting involved with those kind of things as well. There's also a lot of really active local cycling and walking groups that you can be involved in. You don't need to be an activist, you don't need to get out and go to protests, but getting involved with those groups and helping to share information and knowledge about safe walking and cycling is really important because it helps to build community around those forms of transport. It helps to build acceptance and normalises those forms of transport and helps people to understand the ways that they can make cycling and walking the default over driving. So lots of really easy ways for people to get involved that require different amounts of skill and time, but really a lot of it's quite low effort. Bike Adelaide undertakes a lot of advocacy for cyclists across the metropolitan area and provides a lot of detailed consultation. So by becoming a member of Bike Adelaide, you add your name and your weight to our organisation, and we can do the advocacy and all the heavy lifting on your behalf.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Grace and David.
Yes, so interesting. Are you a cyclist?
Not as much as I'd like to be. I really should get more into it. I know it's a very healthy, environmentally friendly thing to do. Are you a cyclist?
Oh, no. I'm in the same boat, actually.
No.
Look, I know it's good for you, but look.
But we don't have to be cyclists to appreciate that. I think good cycling infrastructure is helpful to cars, helpful to pedestrians, and helpful to cyclists as a whole.
Yes,
so
definitely.
fingers crossed, do what David said there and get behind it if you're a big cyclist. But for now, don't go anywhere. Up next, we hear from Carolyn Mounce about mental health in the workplace. You're listening to Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking convos about Adelaide you should be having. Talking about mental health can be vulnerable and confronting. It can be particularly hard to have those conversations in the workplace. To understand how those conversations can be easier, Cassie talked to the director from JobEdge, Carolyn Mounce, to find out more.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
JobEdge is actually a disability employment services provider, so that sounds pretty scary, but what we do is we work with people with injury, illness, including mental health issues, to help them find work.
Why does mental health have a stigma attached to it in the workplace?
There's quite a few reasons. I think the main reason is mental health is still really misunderstood, and mental health is a really big term when you think about it. It covers everything from anxiety, depression, to borderline personality, to post-traumatic stress. So there's a lot going on within those two words. And I think for that reason, it's pretty misunderstood and people are really unsure and lacking confidence about it. So if you talk about it from the perspective of an employer, well, they don't really understand it. They've got limited resources potentially to deal with it. One thing that's really common with employers is they're just afraid that they might say something wrong. So they're not sure what to say. So there's all those sorts of concerns. And then from the individual side, there's often a lot of shame and stigma attached to mental health, and they almost don't like sharing it. They don't like talking about, we don't like talking about our troubles. We don't want to appear vulnerable or, like we're incapable. So I think the two things combined just make it really a tricky situation for people to deal with at work.
How can employees approach talking to their employers about their mental health?
There's a couple of things there. First of all, it really does need to be a safe space. It needs a space where people are willing to open up and be vulnerable. And so one of the ways you can do that as an employer is be a little bit vulnerable yourself and talk about some of your own challenges and issues. And then you just build that trust. That's the key. And then it does become as simple as the "are you okay" conversation. And when we're talking about "are you okay," I'd also recommend you sort of go the next step. So if someone just says, yeah, I'm fine, just explore that a little bit more. And the other keys are no judgment. And you don't need to have the answers as an employer. What you need to do is be willing to have the conversation. Really start focusing, instead of the constant focus being on what's wrong, they start talking about what's strong, what are your strengths, what can we really do to help you move forward. And that's a really empowering conversation for somebody with mental health to start having.
I really like that notion of not what's wrong. I think that's really important.
Quite refreshing, I think. I think a lot of people, when they've got mental health, they get really caught up in everything that they can't do. And it's really important to start thinking about what you can do.
What advice can you leave Adelaide with for Mental Health Month?
I think for people who are struggling at the moment, I think it's really important to realise that you're not alone. Sometimes what we think is, we're really odd or really weird. It's really normal. It's really normal to be afraid of different situations and to feel vulnerable. So you're not alone, even when it might feel like you are. So reaching out is really important. So I'd encourage people to reach out to a general practitioner, a trusted friend or family member or work colleague, or if you feel like you can't do any of that, there are still services like Lifeline or Reach Out services, or you can even contact now, you can get support via text lines. So you don't even need to speak to somebody, but actually reaching out to people and reaching out to others reduces the shame and the stigma around mental health, and it gets you the help you need. So that would be my number one tip, is it's okay to start talking about it. It's become a really important conversation that a lot of people are having. So start talking to others.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thanks for that, Cass and Carolyn. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, you are not alone. You can reach out to JobEdge on 1300 598 528 to talk to a job coach. It's so important that we talk about this stuff, don't you think, Charlotte?
Yes, it's always so important. Like, usually you're the first people you think of check in on are your friends and family, but don't forget your workmates as well.
No, exactly. Like, there's so many people around you that you might not think of to check in. A work environment can be stressful, and I know something I struggle with is finding that differentiation between stress and mental health. Knowing where that limit is, where that line is from stress to mental health issues is really important, and that's why we need to keep talking about this.
Yes, definitely. These are the conversations that we should be having. Let us know your thoughts. Text in at 1300 737 374. You're listening to Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Recently, mocktails and non-alcoholic drinks have boomed in popularity, becoming a delicious and responsible choice. To find out more, Ciaran spoke with Lisa Fraser, owner and co-founder of Anna Drinks.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Hey guys, I'm Lisa Fraser and I am the owner and co-founder of Anna Drinks, which is a non-alcoholic bottle shop in Adelaide.
Really exciting for me. I have been teetotal for 2 years now and I am sick of just having a Coke when I'm out with my friends. What prompted you to open a non-alcoholic bottle shop?
Well, Ciaran, firstly, there isn't one in Adelaide that is totally dedicated to it. But the real story sort of begins last year around Christmas time. My partner and I, we went pretty hard with the partying and the dinners and Christmas and New Year's, and we just found ourselves sort of, I guess, going a little bit too far. And so when January 1 came, I just said to my partner, nah, that's it. We're going to, go sober. We're going to detox 3 months without drinking. And I guess we found ourselves in the same situation as you, right? Like, we're still quite social. We're still getting invited to things in that 3 month period in the fringe. But then I guess when my interest sort of started to peak was when I started exploring all the different non-alc options out there in the beers and the wines and the spirits. And they're all just really good now. I know that they've just come such a long way, and I guess for me it was sort of a now or never thing. So I thought, you know what, Adelaide is ready and needs a place where you can just go in and buy all your premium non-alc goods. So yeah, so that's sort of basically how it all began.
That's so cool. You're right, it's definitely something Adelaide has needed for a while. Now, I think we've all noticed the non-alc sections in our supermarkets are growing daily. Why do you think more people are turning to these options?
Yeah, well, I think it just really comes down to personal choice and preference, really. There are so many different reasons why people may not drink. You could not drink altogether because, you have your own personal lifestyle reasons. It could be religious. You could be pregnant. You could have medical reasons why you're not drinking. Since opening the shop last week on Friday, I've had so many different people come through the door that all have different reasons why they're quite interested in the non-alcoholic space. And I guess if you, like myself, you still enjoy, a glass of red or a beer from time to time, but then it's just so good to be able to sort of moderate that. Or if you've got something important on, you can switch to a non-alc option and still, have a drink with a mate, but then you wake up fine the next day. So I think really the rise of the non-alcoholic drink comes from two things. People are looking for more options and choice when it comes to their social beverages. And I think the second is just health. I think gone are the days that you can sort of afford to have a 3-day hangover. But I do think people are making bigger lifestyle and health choices, and we're seeing a lot more of that. So yeah, so it really just comes down to the quality of the product and also the choices that are out there now.
You mentioned choices and the quality, and it seems interesting how the non-alc offerings we have today are so radically different from the non-alcoholic grape juice, which is all you used to be able to get. Now, people seem to be a bit more discerning, and the line between alcoholic and non-alc, taste-wise, is very fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, there's always room for improvement, but for the most part, most of the beverages out there are very similar and like for like. So there's also a lot of interesting other beverages out there that have gone down the path of what's called a wine alternative, and basically it's not derived from grapes. It's not made as wine and with the alcohol removed, but it's actually a curated beverage from natural ingredients. So on top of having your standard of what we perceive as normal non-alcoholic beverages with the alcohol removed, there's also a lot of cool stuff coming in, sort of, tickles the taste buds a little bit and gives you a little bit of a different experience. So yeah, the quality is definitely there. And as you sort of mentioned, back in the 90s, all you could have was, a lemonade or a Coke, and that's all you could get. And I think now there's a bit more of a demand to say, hey, look, let's be a bit more inclusive. If you're at a wedding or a dinner party, party and you're celebrating something, you also want bubbles and you don't want to feel left out in those social occasions. You don't need a reason now not to drink. I think to be able to go, I'll have a beer, and for it to be non-alcoholic, it's not as judgmental as it used to be many years ago. So it's really, really exciting.
It absolutely is. For someone like myself, inclusivity like this is really important. Now, do you think that with all this, that we've got the ball rolling and we can expect to see the ranges just continue to grow?
Oh, absolutely. I guess it's a bit of a watch this space. There's a lot more coming. And I think what that means is that you just get more choice. If you are someone that is a bit of an enthusiast, say in your beers or in your wines or your spirits, there's so many different options that are sort of there, with the different styles. If you like, let's say, a pale ale or an XPA or a lager, you're likely to find it now. Whereas go back a few years ago, it's like one or the other, there's only one alcoholic beer style or there's only one type of wine out there. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of confidence in the space. And I think as you sort of picked up, there's like more and more people are making that switch or that mix up when it comes to their drinking. So yeah, absolutely. There's more to come.
How can our listeners get in contact with you?
So if you type in Anna Drinks, so ANA, or Anna, as I affectionately call it, stands for Australian Non-Alcoholic. So you can find us online, on Instagram, on Facebook. Otherwise, we are on Hutt Street. So it's shop 1 206 208 on Hutt Street.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Wow, great. Thanks, Ciaran. It's always good to know that there's more options out there.
Up next, Amber takes you through how Hecs debts can affect home loans. Don't go anywhere. You're here on Fresh.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Fresh. Amber is here to give us the lowdown on Hecs debts and home loans.
Wavelength explains on Fresh 92.7.
Good news, guys. As if the world wasn't looking grim enough already, our Hecs debt are now affecting our home loan eligibility more than ever before. Great, as if owning a home didn't already feel impossible. Being tied down to a Hecs debt is not as uncommon as it used to be, but we've seen the amount of Hecs debt people owe have drastically changed too. The Guardian Australia claims that 72% of people who have a Hecs debt owe our federal government more than $20,000, compared to only 47.5% of people in 2005. Not only this, but the number of people owing the government more than $50,000 has also significantly grown. So how is it getting worse? There are multiple reasons for the growing number of debts. Of course, the looming dark reality of inflation awaits us, as well as changes to different repayment requirements and the hiking of university prices. And yes, just to make matters easier, the government has lowered the Hecs debt repayment requirement to people earning $48,361 and over. So many people may not have the opportunity to save for a said home loan anyway. How does the Hecs debt affect home payments though? Lenders will view your student Hecs debt in the same way they would with other forms of debt, such as personal loans, car loans, and credit cards. In fact, many home loan applications will calculate your debt to income ratio, which means a high Hecs debt could influence their trust in your ability to make loan repayments. However, this of course depends on the lender. So there has been an increase in the number of people working to pay off their Hecs debt before even attempting to apply for a home loan. And of course, there are many people who cannot afford to do this. So I guess we now must decide whether to invest in an education or if we'd like to own our own home. Yikes. Good luck out there.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thanks for that, Amber. That was really informative and shockingly sad, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh, that's all right. Luckily, after the break, we have Brayden spreading his positivity on Heaps Good News.
You're listening to Wavelength.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Right now we have Brayden spreading some positivity with Heaps Good News.
Heaps Good News on Wavelength.
October. The time of year where the birds are chirping and the flowers are flowering, and all you need now is a weekly dose of heaps good news to know that spring has truly sprung. And here it is. If my garden heavy intro is something that scratches that green thumb of yours, or maybe you just need some R&R time on the river, then the Riverland is the place to be, as they prepare to host the Riverland Rose and Garden Festival, which begins on October 14th and runs till the 23rd. This eye-catching event brings together garden lovers across the country, as you get to experience stunning open garden displays, art trails, and much more. more. The event took home the Community Event of the Year for 2021, so it's almost guaranteed to be a smash hit this year. And if you don't enjoy gardening, there's enough wineries, restaurants and boating activities up there to remind you that there is something better than that uni assignment that you're still putting off. But please, get that uni assignment done. Your education is important and will be worth it eventually. Anyway, in other news, is the price of petrol starting to affect your weekend dreams of tearing it up on Hindley Street? Well, Adelaide Metro now has a tool for you. Yes, the Public Transport Savings Estimator is available online at adelaidemetro.com.au, and basically for a rough summary, this tool takes into account how many kilometres you drive to work a week, the size of your car and your parking costs, and then works out how much you could potentially save by taking public transport. But before you go buying that second Metro card because you lost your last one, it's important to remember that taking public transport can potentially be slower and you may have to do some extra exercise to get to work. But hey, if it saves you that extra $20 a week to eventually get that house that almost none of us can afford, who can blame you? And lastly, you may already know of Adelaide United's Josh Cavallo, who came out as the first openly gay professional football player, but have you seen the footage of him coming out to his teammates? The footage is part of a documentary series about the men's and women's A-leagues for keepitup.com.au, and it shows teammates supporting Cavallo after his announcement. So hopefully videos like this helps further challenge the negative stigma that gay athletes face in the sporting world sometimes every day. But for now, that's all the good news I have, so go make some more!
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thanks for that, Brayden.
And that brings us to the end of the show tonight. Thank you so much for listening.
Make sure you're subscribed to the Wavelength podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can listen back to our old episodes right now, and tonight's episode will be up soon.
Thanks for tuning in this week. We'll be back next week with another episode sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Charlotte.
That's okay.
It's going to be really sad when you go back to Waruka, a town on the York Peninsula in South Australia known as the gateway to the bottom end. At a 2016 census, it had a population of 348.
Oh, it's so good that you know that knowledge. Just
I know, I've learned so much about your hometown. I'm not reading it off Wikipedia or anything.
No.
But really, we wish you all the best. Great trip home, and it's been a delight having you here.
Thank you so much. All right, don't go anywhere though. Up next, you've got Deep with Easy G. You're listening to Fresh.
Wavelength.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.